You ever read Frankenstein and thought to yourself, man, it'd be super cool if he decided to put a patent on his monster and mass produce it? Well, the anime film Empire of Corpses does just that, turning a zombie apocalypse into a capitalistic nightmare where the dead are desecrated and forced to continue walking even after death, never getting to rest, unless they're rich. It's incredibly bleak, incredibly messed up, but also an incredibly really bad film. Empire of Corpses is a 2015 anime original film adapted from the mind of Project Ito, no relation to Junji, a man whose other notable works include writing a novel called Genocidal Organ, which was later adapted to an anime film, as well as writing the tie-in novel to Metal Gear Solid 4. He was also really good friends with Hideo Kojima, whom he met through Metal Gear Solid fanfiction. It was supposed to be the very first entry in a series of films that would expand upon each other, but unfortunately that never happened due to Project Ito's death in 2009, as well as the film being a critical and commercial failure. It's sad because the film had a lot of promise but suffers from trying to implement too many ideas with no consideration for how they will all fit together to make a cohesive story. Wildwood Studio brought their A-game with the animation and sound design, which really carried the film for me. Unfortunately, it doesn't make up for the messy and lackluster plot that had no real direction whatsoever. The atmosphere of the film was super immersive, with visuals and animation really carrying across the vibe that this was a grimy world powered by corpse labor, with the character designs just being interesting enough to convey each character's purpose, but too bad, a lot of them just act like puppets and not actual characters moving the narrative along. Oftentimes I wondered if they were the real corpses. The vision is there, but man is it obscured by the structure of the story. Empire of Corpses has too many things to say, which results in a bunch of jumbled noise which leads to the film not really saying or meaning anything in the end. Some of the plot developments introduced in the story would have been better saved for a second film. Like, take our main character, John Watson. Yes, that John Watson is caught using illegal technology to illegally bring the corpse of his friend back to life. Something he gets caught doing almost immediately, but doesn't really suffer any serious consequences for it and gets a promotion instead, immediately turning him into a British spy searching for a mysterious contact in colonial India. This turns the film into a globe-trotting adventure as we get hard cuts of the main character going from one location to another in search of a MacGuffin, making the film feel like big pieces of the story were missing and doing the character development no favors, which I guess makes a lot of sense considering the book series was never completed due to the author's untimely death. The film also has a massive problem inserting classical and historical references into the story, only to have them have no real narrative purpose, which, if you're someone who isn't all that familiar with classical literature, will be scratching your head at wondering if these name drops are meant to be all that important, adding an extra layer of confusion to the whole thing. While it makes sense for Victor Frankenstein to be referenced in a 19th century story about the reanimation of corpses, some of the other characters bear no resemblance to the original people they were based off of. And just to show you I'm not exaggerating, here is a list of characters and references the film expects you to get. Frederick Burnaby, Mycroft Holmes, Ulysses Grant, Nikolai Krastolkin, Alexei Karamazov, Lilith Hadley who then becomes Irene Adler, James Bond, Thomas Edison, Sherlock Holmes, Frankenstein's monster, and Charles Babbage, who isn't a person but an actual supercomputer powering every single walking corpse, not to be confused with Paul Bunyan, the other supercomputer powering corpses. And these are just people. Throughout the film there are also references to historical events that shaped our world history, but it doesn't really influence the world building all that much. This ends up making the characters feel like OCs with names of notable figures slapped onto them, as well as to flex classical literature knowledge. And even if you wanted to make a reach for their tie-ins to the plot, you would be hard-pressed to deny the usefulness of Paul Bunyan as a 19th century supercomputer responsible for the control of zombies. It's clear this film had no cohesive direction. Empire of Corpses is set in a world with an alternate history where mankind was able to mass-produce Victor Frankenstein's reanimation technology. Now corpses populate the world as mindless drones doing most of, if not all the labor, as well as fighting all the wars. You might be wondering how such technology played a part in the Industrial Revolution, global trade and economics, as well as how it affected people's morals and the standard of living around the world. Well, don't, because the film never really answers that question. We're basically just supposed to accept the fact that corpses do all the things now and people are alright with it. And if you knew anything about machines during the Industrial Revolution, there were people opposed to things as basic as weaving machines. They honestly thought these machines would steal their jobs and plummet the working class further into poverty. As such, the Industrial Revolution witnessed the large-scale sabotage of new technology. But then we're just supposed to believe that within this world, which is based off our world, that even the most spiritual and religious countries are alright with dead bodies being used as cheap labor. I know capitalism can be brutal, but like, come on, no opposition at all feels like a tad bit unrealistic. Alright, moving on to our protagonist, John Watson, a medical student and corpse engineer. Watson is by no means an interesting protagonist. He's quite passive even when it comes to his own motivations surrounding the revival of his friend. His character design leaves no lasting impression, and it's just there to serve as a reference to the corpse thievery that was rampant during the Victorian era. It was quite popular with med students for some reason. Throughout the first half of the film, Watson is led from country to country on Washington's orders to search for the elusive notes of Frankenstein, the big plot device of the film. And while Washington has plans for the notes, Watson believes this is the key to reviving Friday wholly with his soul intact. They're also doing this to keep the notes from falling into the hands of the first, Frankenstein's OG monster. Watson's thesis is that when the human body dies, it becomes 21 grams lighter, and this reduction in weight proves the existence of a soul. But it also allows a pseudo-soul to be inserted and have a corpse be reanimated. He believes that with the notes of Frankenstein, he'll be able to retrieve the real human soul that vanishes after death. The film tries to make a big deal out of souls, looking at it from a more technical perspective, but fails to really make them feel all that important. The film tries to carry the message of the importance of life and what makes a person, but woefully fails at trying to say anything about it. I couldn't help but bring Fullmetal Alchemist into comparison, being able to quite effectively communicate why no one should go around messing with the dead, all the way back in its second episode. When Edward is listing out the ingredients that chemically make up the human body, you get the sense that there's a heaviness to his words. This is someone who tried, failed, and paid the price for messing with the natural order of life. A soul is priceless, its payment too steep for anyone on Earth. One of the messages behind Fullmetal Alchemist is how sacred life is, and how a human is more than just the sum of their parts. A soul is what galvanizes it. There is no sense of that in Empire of Corpses. There is no hesitance or sacredness that comes with messing around with the dead. Maybe it's done that way on purpose to reflect how truly messed up their world is. But then we have Watson, who doesn't think twice about using Friday's body to prove his thesis. This is supposedly the body of someone who was really important to him, but Friday is reduced to an object, an automaton that just so happens to be a corpse. He's tossed, yanked, and carried around as if he wasn't even human-shaped. Yet when Watson remembers Friday's importance to him, he doesn't stop to reflect the gravity of what he's doing, but instead doubles down, continuing his quest to go against the natural cycle of life. During the second half of the film, when Friday is under the influence of the first, we're treated to a scene that you can tell it's scripted to be heartwarming but lacks the emotional weight to resonate with. This was supposed to be a big moment for Watson's character, but because you never really connected to him, it comes off as feeling forced, stripping the soul away from the film, all 21 grams of it. The film really stretches our suspension of disbelief when it's revealed that Friday was in there all this time without ever giving us a reason or explanation as to why that is. The philosophizing of the film is treated with even less weight. Throughout the film, characters bring the pacing to a screeching halt to say things and spout off philosophical nonsense with a delivery that tries to imply that this was supposed to be something important, bringing a grand revelation that tells you more about the character and their beliefs, but it just leaves you rolling your eyes. It's enough word salad to feed a vegan army. Like, you can't even pretend to understand what the hell they just said. And the characters that suffers the most from this just so happens to be the inserts from the brothers Karamazov. Nikolai just be talking, man, and every word out of his mouth could be the subject of a master's thesis, because I honestly just don't know what the hell he's saying half of the time he opened his mouth to yap. At first I thought maybe I was too dumb to understand, but after rewatching the film, I'm most certain it was just jargon. You'd doubt he was Russian with how fluent he was in Japanese. While in the outskirts of Russia, Alexei Karamazov, who just happened to have stolen the notes of Frankenstein, warns our protagonist not to go messing with the human soul. From his words, we understand that it's dangerous, but he does such a bad job explaining why, I'm not even sure Watson understands. He's like, oh dang, he died. Well, at least I know where to get the notes now. It is only in the second half when the first, gets a hold of the notes and unleashes the full-blown zombie apocalypse that we understand why it's bad. But like, do we actually? Since it's thanks to his direct input that the corpses begin to wreak havoc. Speaking of the first, let's talk about the villains of the film. Empire of Corpses has two villains, the first who is the first, and the second being the twist villain, head of Walshingham himself, M. Both of them have the same goals, but the first has the extra goal of bagging himself a wife because he gets no bitches. With a cut like that, it's no surprise. They both carry a disdain for humans and seek a world without them through the use of corpses, but the first specifically needs the notes of Frankenstein so he can turn Hadley, the only female character in the entire film, and also the love interest for Watson, into a vessel for his wife and turn Friday into a vessel for his soul, renewing his body. How did he know Hadley would be a good vessel for his wife despite her, plot twist, being a robot with magic powers? Who fucking knows, considering they never meet each other up until the climax of the film. M just wants to wipe out humans. His villain goal is the standard, humans are destroying themselves, so I'm here to stop them from destroying themselves by destroying them first. Honestly, these two men were just as confused as the story itself. Anyway, both of them are defeated in some of the most confusing and lackluster events I have ever seen in a film, with the film turning into an underwhelming shonen final battle packaged with sky beams and the power of friendship, a stark contrast to the start of the film. By the end of the film, everyone goes their separate ways, which I thought would be a lot more heartwarming and at least give us some kind of closure, but I was just left asking myself what the hell I had just watched. It couldn't even give a satisfying end to the duo of Watson and Burnaby, cause the moment everything was over, Burnaby just goes, well, that's that, I'm gonna travel now, bye. Like man, Burnaby was so ride or die for Watson, and that man did not deserve it at all. Empire of Corpses wanted to cook, but got cooked instead. Is it a zombie film? Is it a critique on industrialization and capitalism? Is it a steampunk romp through the new world? It doesn't know. And it's this lack of cohesion as well as many other things that make this film really bad. Philosophically and narratively. The world building leaves so many questions unanswered, especially in the epilogue where 4 years have passed and they just don't use corpse labor anymore, with Watson finally meeting up with Sherlock Holmes. It's disappointing, but at least Wit Studio tried their best to carry the film, but could only do so much. This is one film that deserves to be forgotten. Like, come on, there's a reason why you don't see YouTubers calling this some kind of hidden gem or masterpiece. I say, looking in the mirror. But yeah, this is where I end the video. As always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. This film was burnt toast, and I'm off, so stay toasty.